This is Ethical and Professional Standards, and this reading is on ethics and trust in the investments profession. The first LOS is a general one. It asks us to explain ethics. I'd like to start by giving you some historical perspective about ethics. Let's go back to the ancient times when people like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, they wrote and thought about things like good versus evil, moral philosophy, how the behavior of humans could affect future events. I also like to go back to the myth of Zeus. Remember that Zeus felt sorry for the humans who lived on Earth because they were getting beaten up by all the beasts that lived on Earth with the humans. And so Zeus gave the humans the gift of reason, the gift of a moral character, the ability to distinguish between right and wrong. And this provided them with some significant benefits so that they could form communities and craft laws so they could battle those beasts and be more successful. It's interesting that that kind of provides a framework under which the CFA Institute has established the Code of Ethics, establishing things like what is the right thing to do for our clients? What is the right thing to do for our employees? What is the right thing to do for our employers? How can we promote the investments profession? And so this LOS can be summarized in 5 or so bullet points. Ethics refers to a set of moral principles or a set of rules of conduct that provide guidance to the professionals within the industry. It's a set of beliefs that guide the actions. And remember that high ethical standards are critical in maintaining the public's trust. And what you will see throughout the code and the standards is that it's very important that the public trusts the investments profession. Ethics is a principle, a belief, or a fundamental truth that serves as a foundation for our system of belief or behavior. The Institute has documented 6 principles in its Code of Ethics. Let's take a look at them. The first one is that members and candidates must act with integrity. That sounds an awful lot like members should be honest in their decision making or when they issue reports. Members and candidates must act with competence. Well, this sounds like a high skill set. And clearly, the CFA program is training financial analysts to be competent. Members and candidates must act with diligence. This means hard work. When we're given an assignment for a client who has $1 or a client who has $1 million, we need to work hard. Members and candidates must act with respect. And this is important too, even though it's the last one mentioned. Respect for the profession, respect for capital markets, respect for our competition, and respect for all of the stakeholders involved in capital markets, stakeholders like the public and clients, prospective clients, employers, and employees. This will be specifically addressed in the standards in the next reading. 2, place the integrity of the investment profession and the interest of clients above their own personal interests. This is really critical. What's the goal of the financial analyst? Is to provide a service that's going to be in the best interest of the client. 3, use reasonable care and exercise independent professional judgment. Independent professional judgment is important, suggesting that members must act without a bias, without any claim for their own personal gain. Members must do this when conducting investment analysis, investment recommendations, investment actions, and other professional activities. 4, practice and encourage others to practice in a professional and ethical manner. What this means is to be a standard, be a good example, reflect credit upon themselves and the profession. 5, to promote the integrity of the capital market. After all, free enterprise systems would not work without places like the New York Stock Exchange and without the investors who provide the capital to all of the borrowers out there. This occurs through the capital market. And so the capital market has to have this sense of a high level of integrity for it all to work. Maintain and improve professional competence. Of course, education is critical. Members and candidates especially have decided that their high school education or their college education was not enough. So the pursuit of the CFA designation advances that education. Some people have master's degree, some of us have doctoral degrees, but we're improving the competence. Always, always try to improve your knowledge base and professional competence. Now, the CFA Institute has established 7 standards of professional conduct: professionalism, integrity of capital markets, duties to clients and prospective clients, duties to employers, investment analysis, recommendations and actions, conflicts of interest, and responsibilities as a CFA Institute member or candidate. The next LOS asks us to describe the role of the code in defining the profession. The Code of Ethics communicates these shared principles. So members and candidates have all agreed that ethics and moral philosophy and ethical behavior is critical. And so that establishes an expected behavior of members and candidates. Universal protocol of acceptable behavior, so that when members and candidates are observing others in the profession, that their adherence to the code and to the standards is obvious. And the role is to promote the integrity and viability of global capital markets. Because essentially what's happening, capital markets are a place where borrowers and lenders get together and trade. And if everything that you learn in economics is true, which I believe it is, that capital will flow to its most efficient source, then ultimately society will benefit. And the code and standards are examples of principle-based standards. Shared principles of honesty, integrity, transparency, diligence, placing clients' interests first. This sounds an awful lot like what Aristotle was talking about thousands of years ago. The next LOS asks us to identify challenges to ethical behavior. One behavioral issue out there that's fairly common is this concept of overconfidence. Most people believe that they are better or superior to others in at least one or multiple areas. But overconfidence might bias those decision makers. It might result in a failure to consider important inputs that would result in the best decision from an ethical perspective. The second part of this is kind of like a herd mentality or being influenced by specific situations. Situational influences are environmental or cultural elements that can shape our thinking, can shape our decision making, and can shape our behavior. And so a challenge to ethical behavior is to make certain that the member and the candidate is not unduly influenced by outside actions. The next LOS asks us to describe the need for high ethical standards. This should be a fairly obvious one. I mean, after all, the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and the floor of other organized exchanges throughout the world, in addition to all the electronic equity markets and bond markets, really, I mean, trillions of dollars of assets. Here's an important sentence. Even a small number of unethical exchanges can translate into significant consequences. We all know the stories of financial analysts or investors or traders who have done something unethical. High standards tend to prevent a market collapse. The investment industry is built upon trust. And unethical behavior can, of course, cost not only a member's job, but maybe the member's freedom if that unethical behavior is illegal. So let's distinguish between ethical and legal standards. Legal and ethical conducts are not all the same. Sometimes something can be legal and not necessarily ethical, and sometimes just the opposite. But there is a match in the middle where the legal and ethical standards meet. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Some legal behaviors are not considered ethical. The CFA Institute believes very strongly that trading on material, non-public information is unethical, but certain countries have no laws prohibiting this. What does the ethical CFA member and candidate do? Well, of course, we're going to learn later on that the member and the candidate must adhere to the more strict standards. What about whistleblowing? Boy, a whistleblower may expose corruption or dishonesty, but might end up breaking laws in the process. Here's a good sentence to remember. Laws are reactive. Ethical conduct is proactive. Describe and apply a framework for ethical decision-making. Set of principles established to aid the professionals in conducting business with integrity. A good example would be the code. Beyond understanding those 6 ethical considerations, one must apply these principles through ethical analysis. And not all of these issues faced by investment managers or members or financial analysts will have well-documented laws. But there are well-documented codes and well-documented standards within the CFA Institute's program. That's the reading on ethics and trust. Next up is the Code of Ethics and the Standards of Professional Conduct.